Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are joined by Celia Landman, who wrote this lovely book right here that I'm holding up. It's called When the World Tips, Parenting Through Crisis with Mindfulness and Balance. And Celia is a mindfulness educator offering support to teens and adults. She draws from her range of experience working with folks impacted by trauma, addiction, and anxiety to create customized meditations, visualizations, and trainings that reconnect us to our wholeness. And this book is such a good representation of all of that and more. Celia Landman, thank you for being with us today. Welcome to Madness Cafe.
Thank you. I'm really excited to see what happens next in our conversation too. Mm-hmm.
Well, hold on to your seats because here we go.
Okay.
So, in your introduction, you wrote, "This book addresses the fundamental struggle of parenting, loving someone, and being powerless to help them from pain. The ancient Buddhist practice of equanimity, which I call loving and allowing, can give us a way to come home to our ability to love without losing ourselves in suffering." Celia, how did you come to write about this?
Basically, it's the struggle that I experienced being a parent, especially of two children who had difficulties. It was initially, my son was in middle school and he was hit in the head with a soccer ball and had a concussion that wasn't resolving. So he was missing school. We didn't know what was going on with his recovery. He had deficits. It didn't look like he was going to be able to complete his grade. It was really concerning. And at the same time, I had an older child who was extremely depressed and anxious and had a suicide attempt and was hospitalized. So I had two kids who, and I say, you know, neither of their brains was working the way you'd really hope it would be working. And I couldn't change the situation. And I would find myself hovering on this precipice of like, what do I do? How am I going to be okay in the midst of this? So I did a lot of crying in my car. I did a lot of mourning, and I really used the practices that I had worked with for many years to help me get through to the other side. And so my son is fully recovered. He's great. Hates doctors because he saw so many of them.
Yeah.
And my other child still struggles. And we've had more hospital visits. We've had more intensity. And I use a lot of these practices regularly.
This occurred to me when I was reading the book, and it occurs to me again now hearing you talk about the struggles that your family has gone through. Do your children practice any of the mindfulness techniques that you talk about in the book?
So when your mother is a mindfulness educator, it's really easy to overdose them on mindfulness and they become highly allergic. So
Got it.
When they were little, I took them to retreats and it's like, and we're going to sing this song, this mindfulness song. And now what's really interesting is sometimes I'll catch them and doing something, and I'll be like, oh, look at that. Look at that. Because it's not what I tell them to do, it's what they see me doing.
Got it.
And what has transmitted to them. So I'll find it kind of woven in.
Mm-hmm.
But and actually one of my kids, my eldest, said, hey, I think I might want to go back to the monastery. I want to bring my friend. And I was like, and inside I'm going like, I'm doing this little dance, but I was like, oh yeah, you think they'll like it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just so not attached to the outcome.
Yeah, stay calm. Stay
Yeah,
calm.
exactly. Don't startle anybody.
Yes.
No sudden movement.
Don't show that it matters on any level. So yeah, so it's that living it
Mhm.
that transmits more than the because when we have our own kids, we're kind of powerless. We have a lot more influence with people we're not related to.
Yeah.
That's my experience.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel with my brother, my younger brother. Like, other people may listen to my advice or what I say. My brother maybe not listen to advice that I give, but I still give it.
Yeah, because they've seen you, you know,
Yeah.
they've seen you before you became enlightened. They've
Yeah.
seen you.
And that kind of brings up a good point too, because I mentioned, my brother and other family. I don't have kids, but I will say that this book I found incredibly helpful anyway. I mean, there's so much in this that I felt like I feel like the book and what you talk about is helpful for me in my relationships to other people, to like my family, relationship with myself. There's a lot in the book that I found, wow, I didn't think this was going to happen so early that I was going to feel emotional so quick. But I wrote in the margins a lot about, oh, this will be helpful with my relationship with my mom, or this will be helpful in my relationship with myself. So I just want to put that out there that even for people who don't have kids, there's so much in this book that is beneficial. And I even wrote it at the top of my page here when I was, preparing my questions and everything for today, that I feel like this book is a handbook to be a better human and to be in better relationship with other people and with the world and just with yourself. So thank you for writing this book and sharing. So
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really feeling touched that it was so that you felt that value, because my most dramatic, impactful experience was with my children.
mhm,
But this is the same with, I used these things when my mom was dying. I
mm,
used, when my dog was dying, when I'm called on to be with someone who's sick. It's like, we love beings who are gonna feel pain,
mhm,
and we can't take it away.
mhm,
And when I think that it's mine, or when I get confused about where I begin and end and where they
yeah,
begin and end, that's when there's more struggle and more
mhm,
suffering.
mhm,
Because one of the biggest learnings is that our state of mind and being, our state of heart, transmits. That the more calm and peace and staying in integrity with my, what we call in Buddhism, volition, right? It's
mhm,
my wishes or agency. It's like, what can I do here?
mhm,
The more I stay in integrity with that, with what I want to contribute, then I show up the way I want. But if I
right,
lose that perspective and I go into the fixing mode, or the, what can I do? What can I do? How can I make this better? This can't be.
mhm,
This is so awful, terrible. And I do all the overlayment of pain.
mhm,
My stress, my anxiety, my discomfort, actually, they've done numerous studies about this, it transmits.
mhm,
So you know what it's like when you're doing something and somebody's nervous and they might not even say a word to you, but you pick it up and it's just like more stress, and it actually registers as pain in the body.
yeah, yeah. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that, at least in our society, women are, we're kind of taught that we're supposed to like take on everybody else's pain. right? That's how we can be helpful, is that we take everything on, and that's how we show our love, is by taking on everybody else's pain. But that's not helpful at all for us. It doesn't help us, it doesn't help the other person. And so that's kind of a revolutionary thing that you're saying in this book, is that you have to care for you in order to be able to care for other people. That you have to stay balanced in yourself in order to be of use to other people.
Yeah. And otherwise we just drown. And then
Mhm.
there's two people drown, and nobody's on the shore.
Yeah.
And I think the really hard thing is where the training or the expectation, or if in your family of origin, or even the culture that we're in, it doesn't tell us to stop and consider, what's my capacity? The question always is, can you give a little more?
Yep.
Mhm.
Can you get like give to your beyond empty.
Give
to your,
110%.
yeah, to
Mhm.
your, and I would say, no, please don't do that. Please don't do that to yourself.
Yeah.
And it requires this assessment of capacity, because when I start to lose it, and I know when I start to lose it, because I get irritated, or I get short, or I start feeling helpless, or one of the many feelings that I know, impatience, and that means I need to go right to my pain, because my stuff is getting big, it's getting heavy, and if I don't attend to it, whatever care I give to you is not going to come out as helpful. It's almost like I'm giving, there's that have to, and the should, and the messiness of it all.
Yeah.
And it transmits. It 100% is felt.
Earlier today, I was reading some quotes from your book to my children. We just happened to be hanging out together while I was preparing, and I would say, "What do you think of this?" And I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the exact words you used, but you said something along the lines of fix it energy, that energy that we give our children when we're trying to fix them or change them is actually a violence towards kids, or and to ourselves when we're trying to
Mhm.
fix ourselves and change something. That can be a violence. And I asked my kids, I said, "What do you think about that?" And they were like, "Well, violence seems heavy for that maybe it's not helpful, but violence, why do you think it's actually violence to express that, fix myself, change myself, or to my children?"
Anytime I close my heart, or to myself or to someone else, or I like throw somebody out of that circle of love, I think of it as a way of perpetrating violence, that I'm excluding. So when I have the energy of not good enough, it's very insidious, but it's extremely harmful.
Mhm.
We can weaponize anything.
Mm.
So I think it's really a weaponized judgment.
Mm.
No, I'd love you, I do love you, but I'd love you a lot more if you were some just a little more tidy, just a little more responsible, just a little more. So it's that really subtle energy of disapproval, which does as much harm as anything else, any other modality of of exclusion. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Totally. And I
Yeah.
learned, I do holotropic breath work, and one of my lessons in one of my recent journeys was about how much self-violence we, or I in this case, because it was me, that I had perpetrated against myself with those judgments, those thoughts, those declarations of not being good enough, of needing to change, of that fix it, fix it, fix it energy. If I just read one more book, if I just learn one more thing,
Yeah.
I'll fix myself. I'll be a better person. Yeah, that I agree with you. It's self-violence, but it was interesting to ask my children about what they thought about that.
And when you're talking about that, it's like I'm also hearing that idea that there's some kind of finish line. There's
Yes.
some kind of level where
Yeah.
I'm going to get to the place where I will be good enough to be loved. I will be good enough to always consider myself.
Yeah.
And withholding that is, I mean, that's a form of neglect to
Mhm.
ourselves, which is abuse. You know, if you have a parent who withholds emotion, that's neglect, withholds affection,
Mhm.
right? Or attention or care.
Yeah.
So when we withhold that love, it's one way to call it is violence,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what it's doing. It's kicking us out of that circle of love and okayness, waiting for someday. And then the bar keeps rising because there's always
Mhm.
another book. There's always another modality. I'm always falling over and I'm like, I'm human. I'm gonna do the best I can, and I'm gonna mess up, and I'm gonna do things that people don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah. The topic of violence comes up in your book relatively early on, and you talk about the violence in your household of origin with your father. Would you be willing to talk about that a little bit and how that came forward as part of your story?
Whew, I have to take a little breath. Because that's actually something that I've been writing about a lot.
Oh, wow.
I'm writing a memoir.
Ooh.
And much to the dismay of many people in my family, I'm writing a memoir about what it was like to grow up in my house. I grew up with six kids in 9 years.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was super pressurized.
Right.
So there was a lot of chaos.
Mhm.
There was a lot of chaos, and I had a dad who was not, he didn't think he was going to be in a family. He didn't think he was going to be the dad of six children, and here he was, and it was not what he wanted.
Mhm.
And he felt really thwarted in his desire to be a poet and to live this life of academic concentration and focus. And the way it came out was he would rage, and he would rage almost daily. Sometimes starting when I was about 4 or 5, when my younger sister was born, number 4. It didn't go away. It didn't change. I remember feeling terrified at home, because you just didn't know when he was going to go off. And it could be, it was so quick. And then we did this thing that was very codependent, where the other kids would blame that kid, whoever dad had snapped at and screamed at, and this kid who was crying, and we'd follow them, and we'd, you made dad mad. So there was no safe place. There was no comfort. And my mom, I do not know what she was doing during those times. I don't know where she was. I don't have a good memory of it. And I have a very strong trauma trigger around rage. And I've been working with this for years and years and years. But also, the thing that totally shocked me was when my daughter was 2, I started raging. And I was so ashamed, because I knew what it felt like. And she was hysterically crying the first time. She just saw, like, she couldn't, it was, I mean, it is abuse. It is violence, especially when a big person rages at a small person. And it does a lot of harm, especially when there's no repair. So I know the kind of harm it can do. And, you know, I felt so guilty, and I did my best to repair, but I couldn't stop because I didn't know it was an addiction. Because you get a hit of dopamine when you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's those little, they call the peptide receptors in your body that when you let go and you rage, oh, such a relief.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But it has a huge cost.
Yes.
And what happens is over time, we get better, faster, stronger at raging. So it takes less and less, and there's bigger. It seems like people get angrier as they get older.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not your imagination. Because it's like they're practicing it. So when my daughter was, I think she was 7, maybe 7 or 8, I had started already practicing in the Buddhist tradition I was in, and I had yelled at her and her younger brother, and she said, "You always say you're sorry, but you still yell at us." And I felt, and even now as I say that, I just feel, that teariness of remorse, you know? And I just thought to myself, this kid is right. Because, yeah, I still do this. And I knew what the legacy, I knew what the inheritance was. She's going to grow up in rage, or she's going to marry, people in my family have married people with anger, or, you know, raging, or they've, you know, low self-esteem, trauma. There's a whole host of things that you can have. You can carry emotional flashbacks, getting stuck. I would have this, like, you know, kind of freeze response that would really take me out. Sometimes, you know, like days, I just wouldn't feel grounded. It would take me a really long time to get back. So I decided I do not want to transmit this to my kids. And there was this part of one of the mindfulness trainings that said, when I am angry, I will do and say nothing. I will breathe deeply and take care of my anger. And I thought, who are these people? Like, where do you meet them? So I had met them though. And I was like, okay, I know them. Let me really try. So I had done the walking practice. And when I got angry, and I talk about this in the book, I explain this practice of coming back to my body, to my feet, but it takes training because it's so ingrained. I had lived, you know, for 18 years watching rage. It had been baked into me. I only knew rage or silence, hiding or raging. So to do something totally different, it's not easy. So after I've been practicing, there was one night my kids made a mess. I was really tired, and it was like, and I knew I was going to yell. I knew I was going to start screaming. I remembered I don't want to do it. I want to do something else. And I knew what to do. And I went outside and I just took one step, felt my feet, breathing, and it was excruciating because it's that addictive, like, craving, like, and I got the feeling like I was tied down. It was like, and all I want to do was yell. I was like, just there were ropes around me pulling me in, and it was physically and emotionally painful. And but it was one step. That's all I could do, was take one step, one breath. That's all you have to do. One step, one breath. And then, you know, it's almost like the Hallelujah chorus was playing. And I was like, what just happened? I'm not angry. Like, it had left my body, because it's that energy of, it's the adrenaline, the cortisol, it's all those hormones. And what the moving does is actually, it helps move that stuff through your body a little bit. For me, it does it way more than just stopping and breathing, because I need physical. I need to get it out of my body. And I was just standing there. It was raining, and and I was in the dark and I had no idea how long I'd been there. It could have been 10 minutes or it could have been 45 minutes. I don't know. But I wasn't angry. And it was like this spaciousness. You know how the sky at night is so dark and big and it can hold everything? And then I was like, wow, I'm just here and I'm not angry. And I made it through. And I went back in and I said, you know, when you guys mess things up, I feel angry. Can you help me clean this up? And they were like, yeah. and then it was like, okay. It was like, okay. But anger's a second, you know, people talk about it as secondary emotion. What's under the anger? That anger was so old because it was that nobody cares about me. No one cares. They're not gonna, and the thing was, I didn't care. I don't care about me either. And the only thing that could happen was the protection of anger that was going to say, no, I don't want to. But the only thing I knew was anger. I didn't know how to use words. And I was like 40 something years old. It's been a really long road with anger. And I still have, of course I feel angry, but I have 100 is it 180 or 360 all the way around? Flipped my relationship with anger.
So you've done a 180.
I've done a 180.
Yeah.
I guess if I did a 360, I'd be exactly where I started.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
With you talking about this, and this is something that I think comes up in the book a lot, and it keeps coming up in the podcast on like different episodes that we've talked about, is this idea of embodiment and attunement, being aware of what's going on with you. And whether it's the initial awareness of, uh-oh, I'm getting angry, I'm going to do something I don't want to do. Well, I guess even before that, realizing I don't want to be this way when I'm angry. And then realizing that you're angry and realizing, okay, something else needs to happen. But then even going deeper and realizing what's beneath the anger. This practice, you know, with your mindfulness practice, you go into that, right? And you talk about how you can sit with your pain, you can sit with your emotions and learn from them, right? And that's a service that you do for yourself as well as for the people around you. And I think it's really awesome that in the book you also give examples of how to do these things, how other people can incorporate all of this, or even just parts of it into their own lives. I guess I don't know, lumped a bunch of stuff in there together, but can you talk to how people can bring this sort of awareness and practice into their own lives so that when they get angry or a crisis comes up in their life or in their family or with their kids, that they can go, okay, I have this to fall back on? Okay, big question.
Yeah,
A thousand parts.
Well, if we have a week, well, we can take this apart. But there's like different layers. The big global answer for that is stay with your pain. I have something over here. Yes, it's from Sylvia Bornstein, who's a Buddhist teacher, and it says, "May I stay with the pain so it doesn't harden into anger." Because underneath anger is a form of pain. And a nonviolent communication trainer, Sarah Payton, I like what she says a lot. She says, the two triggers for anger are, am I safe and do I matter? And that are, you know, we're constantly scanning those two questions. Am I safe and do I matter? I used to work with kids in rehab, teenagers, and some of them were there because of anger. And I'd say, think about the last time you got mad. Two questions. Did you feel safe? Did you feel like you matter? And without fail, it was one of them. So it's either my safety or somebody I care about safety. or the mattering of me or somebody else.
Mhm.
Right? So if those two things, if the answer is no, it's the protector, right?
Mhm.
That's what anger is. And anger, when we speak for our anger, not from our anger, right?
Mhm.
That's when it's hugely powerful and it gives us the energy to do something. But when I am blended with anger, right? When I feel it in my body, the way anger works is it floods out my reasoning, it floods out my compassion. So it's even the compassion for myself. So the prefrontal cortex is awash in stress hormones.
Mhm.
So we don't have access to our executive function, to that idea of what potentially will happen. And we don't care. So we do and say things we would never do and say with a fully functioning brain. And throw in, if you're a teenager and you're still not fully baked, you know, all
Yeah.
the cooked all the way. Yeah, so you even have less executive control, and we don't know consequence in that moment.
Yeah.
So that's the minute when we want, or it's not that minute actually, it's the minute when we feel irritation. But because when you get to that place where you're sort of unhinged and it's all big, there's very little you can do except get yourself away.
Yeah.
What I've learned over in my experience, one of the most helpful things is to notice irritation, notice the ramp to anger. So notice when I start feeling, and I used to talk to these kids about, like, where do you feel it in your body? Like, where do you start? In some kids, we get hands, the jaw, some you clench, or you just feel that little like, a frustration, or, that like twinge. That's a really important signal. I need care, because that's pain. When I don't have a shared reality with somebody, or I want respect, or whatever it is, that's a form of pain. And one of the things I come back to over and over is, I care. I care about my pain. Take it, to let me know that I care is actually doing something. So that's that ability to accompany myself. Because if I'm not with myself, it's really easy to just follow that trajectory of anger. And then there I am, all angry. And then, we can do practices like slow walking, or sometimes people actually push against a tree, or, just so there's some physicality where it's not violent or aggressive. They've studied this I think it was probably the 70s, because we did things like this in the 70s. You'd punch pillows and scream, angry, like, get it out, get it. But what that actually does is it kind of reinforces the anger, because we learn the circuitry. So I learn aggression when I'm angry. I learn I need to hit something. And I saw so many kids putting their fists through walls. And it's like, well, if the wall's not there, what are you going to punch? Who are you going to punch? So it's right. So we start to put action, we start to link behaviors, and we don't want to link violent behaviors. So that's why we do the slow moving. We do something that's like more grounded, or like walking, or some people just lie on their backs and do, really slow, deep breaths. I go into nature. That's always a resource for me. It's really hard to argue with the trees.
Or you can, but they just won't argue back.
They know more than me. Yeah. They do photosynthesis. They use sunlight for food. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. So there's things we can do, but it's really paying attention to, when do I have capacity to catch myself? And it's not when I'm full on
Right.
fury.
Yeah.
It's
It
too late.
has to be before.
Yeah.
It has to be where I'm just like, eh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm starting to lose my compassion. Yeah, yeah. So that's when the pain has hardened
Mm.
into anger. And there's always pain
Hmm.
under anger.
Hmm.
That I can guarantee.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I want to switch gears just a little bit away from violence and pain, and well, maybe not from pain. I want to talk about parenting a little bit because
Mhm.
that is one of the focuses of your book. And I want to talk about this idea. One of the things I love about your book so much is it's in your writing, I feel you give permission to not think of parenting as this beautiful, magical fantasy of perfection, for lack of a better word. In fact, you talk about how perfection or the idea of perfectionism in parenting can actually really screw us up. Would you please talk a little bit about in the book where you really delve into parenting and how what we've been sold about it, the myth is it's not real, it's not reality, and we need to face that so that we can come to parenting in perhaps a more mindful way.
Another
Oh,
big question.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
throwing them out there.
Can you
This-
just solve the problems of the world in an hour, please?
well, I mean, this stuff is systemic too, and a lot of this is because of patriarchy, right? We
Mhm.
have,
Our favorite friend, patriarchy.
yeah.
Our
It
favorite
all
frenemy.
comes back to patriarchy because there's this huge myth that this is a biological destiny for those born into a female body is procreation. And so there's that burden, number
Mhm.
one. Yeah. Raquel's making a face, and I'm like, I'm sure you can speak to this. You know, that
Mhm. Mhm.
if you don't buy into that, somehow you're not of,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
where do you fit in?
broken or something's wrong with me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like this inner coldness that you don't want to share. You're nurturing,
Mhm.
like it's a waste of a body if you
Yeah.
don't procreate.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's one thing. And then there's this kind of hallmark mythology, like the mom and the child, and then I recall like looking at my firstborn in the NICU and going, who are you? Like, what? Wait a minute. Like, wow, we're going to be together for a really long time, and I don't know you at all. Trying to feel those things that I thought were like this automatic love, and it wasn't that I didn't care about this baby, but I didn't know this baby. I didn't have this, and I don't think I'm that unusual that I didn't like go like, oh yeah, this is my soulmate forever and ever. No, it's like kind of curious, like what is gonna happen now? We're two people who don't know each other.
Mhm.
You're only unusual in the fact that you're willing to say it out loud. Because if you
That part.
say that out loud, what kind of mother are you?
Yeah.
Yep. That part.
Yep.
And and then we have children who are real people, who don't follow the script. And more, every parent I meet has a child in some form of crisis. So it's not like when your kid's little. I remember there was this Woody Allen movie years ago. I can't remember which one it was. And he's talking to all these little teeny weeny kids, and they're all saying what they become when they grow up. This one little girl, she's like, I'm really into leather. And this other one's, I don't know what he was saying, like, but it was all stuff, that parents aren't going to be like, oh yeah, my kid's going to grow up and be whatever, they're gonna, my kid's going to grow up and be a pole dancer, or my kid's going to grow up and sell weed, and my kid's going to grow up and embezzle funds, or, you know,
Yeah,
they're
but somebody's
people.
kid is gonna do it.
Somebody's kid is doing all this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And, and sometimes it's our kids doing all this stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. And not my kid.
my kid's going to be banned from CVS for stealing eyeliner. I don't know, they're take your pick. So we don't talk about the things that are hard. And then when this stuff invariably happens, because they're in this culture where we reward materialism and we do not support, we don't give financial, time, or status or regard to people who choose to parent,
Mhm.
because it's considered a very low scale job, because you don't monetize it, right? So we're
Right.
not financially contributing to
Free labor.
economy. Yeah. So it's of no value. So there's disregard for that and disrespect. When we have this kind of perfect storm of not valuing parents who want to stay and present with their kids, who want to contribute to their kids, and the need to financially support them and be in the world and have some kind of value, feel some sort of external value too, it can have really detrimental consequences. I see this as another, it's like a systemic thing, that more and more kids are having crisis because we live in a culture where nurture, responsiveness, acceptance, and honesty are not valued.
Mm.
Because we want to live in the Pinterest beautiful world where you want to feel, and this has been documented too, about, you want to feel depressed. Go look at somebody's Instagram who has kids that are, they're skiing in the Alps and getting diplomas, and meanwhile, and you're like, yeah, my kids, my kids work in rehab, and my kids like, yay, 6 months without self-harm. Congratulations. We're not celebrating that so loudly.
Yeah.
But that's how it is. So there's this shame that permeates when you're not in the world with this kind of really public display of accomplishment and health and wholeness. So it requires for us to dig deeper. It requires us to do a lot of work with accompanying ourselves and valuing what we are doing, valuing the intention to give care, to show up even when the world isn't going to give it.
Another thing, and this is from somebody who is not a parent. I kind of have a hard time when I see it, is that oftentimes I see kind of this ideal held up that parents, or I guess specifically mothers, are supposed to, like, their kids are supposed to be their complete life, like absolute everything.
Yep.
That their kids are their identity, that they don't have an identity outside of their children, that they don't have a life or interests outside of their children. And that seems to be upheld as like, this is what a good mother is, right? This is she has no identity outside of her children, right? Which I have a really hard time with. That just seems really unfair, and it's not valuing the woman as a being.
It's kind of paradoxical, because it's like the woman is held to this high ideal of motherhood, of perfectionism, and at the same time, it's not valued at all.
Right,
So
right.
it's like these two ends of a spectrum of this perfection ideal, and yet we don't value it.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think where I'm going with this is that then if your kids are your entire identity, so if something is going on with your children, if your children are having a really hard time or they're in crisis, that you also have to be in crisis.
Ah,
God forbid if you should have any happiness in your life at the same time that your kids are in crisis. Celia, you talk about that in the book about emotional blending
mm.
is how you talk about it.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit and talk about a little bit more detail about what emotional blending is and why it's maybe not an ideal that we should hold up?
Yeah, and this is hugely important in the practice that I'm talking about, this practice of stability, because emotional blending is where it's like this, like the enmeshment where I feel what you feel, right? It's beyond what we term as empathy. It's really like, oh, because there is this connection between people who are in relationship, whether you're a parent or a child or a couple or someone you care about. And they did this experiment that I quote in my book, where they wired two people up and had one person who they would give shocks to, electrical stimulation, and it would register in this pain, this pain circuitry in the brain. And then they would tell the other partner, we're going to give them a shock. And even the knowledge that that person was going to be in pain would activate the pain circuitry, the same pain circuitry in their brain, minus a locator site. And it was not a choice. So we are going to feel pain when someone we love is in pain, or
Right.
someone where we might not feel like we love them all the time, but we are deeply connected to them. This can be our dog. This can be anybody we know who we care about who's in pain. The problem with that is that now we have two people who are really in pain. Whereas if my desire is to show up and with care, with balance, with presence, and that's my intention, how can I, what I call uncouple, so take care of that pain? I'm not denying it's there. I want to take care of it. So it goes from all over paralytic to I can take care of this pain. And now I can do something outside of this pain. So it's being able to, the more I care for something, it's like this big tide pool, right? A pain. And the more I'm able to notice it. So first I notice it in my body. What does the pain feel like? And then I do this thing that's called mindfulness, where I actually kind of make it a little separate. So that's the piece, that's mindfulness of feelings. So I notice, I can name it. Oh, there's real anxiety in me, and it feels like this. It feels like a squeeze. It's right in my chest, right? And I can even go to the shape of it. I can give it a color. I can give it a texture, a hot or cold scale. And then I can go, okay, let me just breathe with it. Let me hold it. Oh, what would this, I care about this. I care about this pain. What would this pain really like for me? And I can spend time giving empathy, giving care to my own pain that was stimulated by someone else's pain. And when I'm able to do that, it's like this big tide pool. It can drain. So it's much less, it still hurts. Somebody I care about is ill or is injured or is having a difficulty. But I know what to do with this pain. And then when I'm feeling resourced enough and balanced enough, then I can do something else. Then I can go to the grocery store. Then I can, do the wash, or I can call a doctor and advocate. I can do so many things. But if I'm flooded with this emotion, it occupies so much of my intellectual real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yeah.
So it's knowing how to do that. And that
Okay.
is something that is a huge gift in our lifetime, because we will always encounter.
And then you can show up for that person. You're not just drowning in their pain with them. Right?
Yeah, because we've seen those, or perhaps we've felt it too. It's like I can't even breathe with this. I can't even be around this person who's in pain. Oftentimes, I know end of life. I've been through end of life with a bunch of different people, and it takes a lot of grounding to be able to show up with the presence, calmness, and to generate the energy of love with them, instead of going into fear and worry and pain, because we know that this is the end. So it's really a gift when I can show up like that.
Well, and I'll just speak from my own experience. When I'm in the middle of something like that, when I'm going through something heavy or something emotional, when I turn to somebody and they meet me with, oh, I'm going to jump in that pain with you, that doesn't help me. I need that person to be a support for me, as opposed to them showing that they have now been overwhelmed by my pain as well. Because not only do I then feel guilty because I've brought pain onto somebody else, and then I'm also angry because this isn't what I came for. Now I need to make you feel better. And then I also am like, okay, I'm not getting the support that I need.
Yep. Yeah. And it's capacity.
Yeah.
When somebody has exceeded capacity and they've taken on that pain, they can get tipped over. And then that's exactly what happens. We feel it. We feel this person's need. They really need some stability. They really need some help. They need some support. But we're the one. But it was like, wait a minute. I thought the spotlight was on me, but now the spotlight's on you, because you're so freaked out about this. And I think this is also a very gendered trait, that it's like, now we have to take care of the person who's really triggered by our pain.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love is that I have people in my life that I know can handle big things. I know now who to go to when I need some, like, hey, can you listen to this? Because this is really big. No. And then I have people who I can be with much lower intensity things. But when you have big things, it's like, it's really a skill, and it's such a gift when you can offer it to yourself and to other people. I think I talk about this in the book. I can't even remember. The calm horse and the racehorse. Did I talk about that?
I don't remember that.
Oh, all right. I didn't put it in the book. It should have been in the book. The Kentucky Derby, I watched it once, and I don't know much about horse racing, but so there's these beautiful race horses, and this horse, he's all like done up, and the jockey's on him, and they're trying to get him into the chute, into his little gate. And then they have this other horse, this kind of like, I don't know, like this middle-aged, regular old horse walking him in. I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why is that horse with that, like, what, are they friends or something? And this woman who knows about horses, she said, oh, that's the calm horse. She said, they can't get the racehorse in the chute because he's so wired without the calm horse. The calm horse walks next to him, and just the energy of that calm horse will help the horse get where he needs to go. And I was like, oh, I want to be the calm horse. Like
Oh, and
that's
I was thinking the opposite. We all need a calm
Yeah, I was
horse.
need
thinking,
a
I need
calm
a calm horse.
don't
Yeah.
we? But I'm like, I couldn't be the calm horse. I'm like, oh,
Ah.
that's it. I want to be that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well,
Well,
I like it.
we could
Calm
talk
horse.
forever. Raquel's got questions. I've got questions, but we've kept you a long time. Was there anything you wanted to tell our audience that we didn't give you the chance to?
What
Calm horse. Give it to us, calm horse.
the calm horse? Yeah. That well, if you want to be the calm horse, you need another calm horse too, because you're not always nobody's always the calm horse. But I think it is a commitment
Mm.
to pay attention to your pain and
Mm,
your hurt. And it's a commitment to show up with care for yourself.
Mm.
And it is this promise we can make to ourselves over and over. And in my experience, it's one of the most precious things that I can have in my life, because everything can fall apart, but I know how to show up for myself and care. I don't have to make the world perfect. I don't have to fix it, because I know what to do when I'm scared, when I'm mourning, when I'm angry, when I'm hurt. With everything, I know how to show up and still care and accept myself and hold myself in a place of love. And I work at it. Some days harder than others. Yeah.
yep.
Oh, that's beautiful, Celia. Thank you.
Thank you.
It feels complete.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to talk to you about these things and really be honest and open and share about what is true.
You've got tears.
I do. I do. I do. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you.
In our reflections
Mhm.
today, let's
Mhm.
start with your tears.
Yeah, this book brought up so much for me. Yes, it's a book about parenting. I also come away with this being a book about reparenting, as in reparenting yourself and being able to be there for yourself and to be able to rely on yourself and know that you are there for yourself, that you're not going to abandon yourself. It helps me to see my parents with a sense of compassion and empathy that maybe I don't always have, and to understand that we aren't given an instruction manual when we have kids or when we are born. Nobody gets an instruction manual, but this, in my opinion, and I'm not being, I don't think I'm being melodramatic or hyperbolic about it, but I think this is the closest thing that we can get to
And Raquel
having
is holding up Celia's book.
yeah, holding up Celia's book. This book, When the Whole World Tips, is, I think, the closest that we can get to having an instruction manual for being a better human.
Yeah, that's very thoughtful. I think the book overall for me gave lots of permissions about having real feelings. This permission, number one, of identifying that I have feelings about my own parenting that I'm uncomfortable with, that
Yeah.
I'm actually uncomfortable with. Today, when Celia talked about how good the rage can feel sometimes, I remember taking care of my mom, and my mom had done something with the toothbrushes. She had Alzheimer's, and she had taken everybody's toothbrush in the house and wrapped them up, and nobody knew whose toothbrushes were hers. And for whatever reason, that's the thing that set me off this day. And I
Yeah.
just went ballistic. I was screaming at her about these toothbrushes. And the thing that I remember so much was how good it felt to scream. It just felt so good. It was like, getting it out. So I don't think I've ever been, as Celia put it, addicted to the rage, because maybe not. I was immediately had so much guilt and remorse and went into action steps for myself of how not to repeat that behavior. Not that it always worked, but I also worked really hard on not repeating that behavior. But it's admitting that the rage feels delicious almost.
Yeah.
And that sometimes being a parent is not fun. Sometimes it's like, fuck this job. It fucking sucks sometimes.
Yeah.
And that, and being in relationships fucking sucks sometimes. And then being like, okay, I'm allowed to sit with this feeling and actually acknowledge it and feel, what does this feel like for me? Being human and not being perfect is actually okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's acceptable. I accept myself. I love myself. I'm going to, as you just put, Raquel, I'm going to reparent myself. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to show up for me. I will do this. And if I have capacity that Celia brought up, and if I have capacity, then I may do it for others as well. But I don't have to. And the other thing I thought I really loved about what she said that I wanted to bring up is she said she has friends who sit in that capacity for her. But when she was describing it, she said, I'll call my buddy up and say, hey, I've got this really big thing. Do you have time and do you have capacity right now? That's asking for consent.
Yes.
That's consenting to, can I be there for you right now? We don't do that enough in our culture.
We really don't.
We don't say, oh my God, I'm having this explosion right now. Raquel, do you have the capacity to sit with me right now? Or should I call another friend? And not be like freaked out if Raquel says, oh, actually, no, I've had a terrible day and I don't think I can sit for you in that capacity right now. Right? We don't even ask for consent around these things.
Yeah.
But this awareness, just reading the book and hearing Celia talk about it and hearing your take on it, Raquel, which is so, so important. I just can't thank you enough for that reparenting idea.
Yeah. And I did not expect that to come up for me with this book at all. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This applies to so many people. It applies to everyone.
Yeah, everybody.
Parent or no, because we're all in relationship.
We're all human.
Yeah, we're all human. This is our how-to guide, right? It's, as you said, it's our permission. And I'm so grateful to Celia for writing the book and for being so open and candid. And I have to thank her family too for, I mean, for, I'm guessing, consenting to her sharing this, because these are very vulnerable things that she talks about. And some version of this exists in all of our lives. For Celia to put this out there and to be like, all right, here it is. You know, we all have shit in our lives. We all do. But here's a way that you can exist and exist well and still show up for yourself and still show up for others. That is huge. And I'm so grateful to Celia for writing this. And so I want to just read this one quote from toward the end of the book. And Celia says, I'm going to try to read this without crying. I send my heart to your heart and wish for you to be a presence of care for yourself in each moment. May your heart be at peace in the midst of your life, and may you rest in understanding and balance always. May this be so for you.
May it be so.
May it be so. Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.